Welcome to Empowered by Iron, the podcast for female strength athletes by female strength athletes. We are your hosts, Dr. Kristin Lander from Fiercely Fuel Nutrition Coaching and Dr. Mary Morton, scientist and weightlifter. Together, we are Empowered by Iron. Hello, ladies. Welcome back to Empowered by Iron. This week, we are going to talk about refeeds and cheat days and why a cheat day may not be the best thing for you, especially if you've suffered any type of disordered eating or an eating disorder.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not really a fan of cheat days. We can get into that.
We'll get into that. But before we do, don't forget that we do our weekly Q&As now over on Patreon for just $5 a month. You can be part of our community there for question and answers. And then anything else we post on Patreon is only $3 support a month. Your support helps keep our podcast going. And without you ladies, we wouldn't do any of this and none of this would be possible. So thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So let's
On that note,
let's get into it.
let's talk about what a cheat day is real quick, because I often hear people, even like my own nutrition clients, sometimes get confused. If I give them a refeed day, they think that it's a cheat day and they get the two confused. So I think that we can all come to the general consensus of what a cheat day is, right?
Right.
It's basically just an unstructured day of eating whatever the hell you want to eat.
Mm-hmm. Whatever you want to eat. There's no caloric restriction. There's just, you see it, you want it. What is it, a seafood diet? I see it, I eat it.
Yes. Yeah, basically. I mean, that's how I have come to understand cheat days.
Well, and I think that is, I mean, not just your understanding. I think that was the general purpose. For the bro science of the history.
The bro science. Yes. Hey, you guys, when I was researching this for this episode, I found this really awesome article do you remember the title? It was like, do bodybuilders use evidence-based? Yeah, do they use evidence-based information? And it was
in their dieting.
Yeah, in their dieting. Yeah. And it was actually did not rag on the bodybuilding community too much, but they did say that basically that there is a lot of uninformed people giving advice is basically what they said. But the people that actually know what they're talking about do use evidence-based methods.
Yeah.
So it was funny that was the title of this research article.
Basically what it said is if you know what you're doing, you'll be fine. Like if that's your coach, if your coach doesn't know what they're doing, they go and fuck you up.
So basically, so cheat day is
Unstructured.
A refeed day or refeed period, because it doesn't just have to be a day, which we're going to get into, is basically, you can think of it as a structured, planned period of time. It's very specific and has very specific rules and has specific science behind it and physiology behind what it's doing to your body.
Right. And it has a limit. It's
There's
just like, it would just be like counting your macros on any other normal day, whether you were in a deficit or not. A refeed is just another day of counting macros. They're just more.
Yeah, they're just more. So basically refeeds are used during periods of caloric restriction. And the refeed is a short-term restoration to your caloric balance or your energy balance. So it's bringing your calories up for a period of time. Now that can be a day, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks. There's some really awesome research out there on this now that I completely geek out to. Jackson Pios and Eric Helms are doing awesome research on this. There's a bunch of other people that are doing this, but they're finally putting out, like, they're researching this stuff that everyone in the nutrition world has kind of known anecdotally for a long time, but we don't exactly know why it works. And so they're kind of figuring out why it works. But what we know is that during a period of caloric deficit, we talked about this actually in episode 102, that is maintenance and nutrition goal.
Yeah.
We talked about the metabolic adaptations that occur during a caloric deficit. And those are the decrease of leptin, so you're less satiated from your food, the increase in ghrelin, so you're more hungry, and then the decrease in thyroid hormone, which decreases your metabolic rate, and then the decrease in total daily energy expenditure. So those are the metabolic adaptations that we know happen in a caloric deficit. The idea of a refeed is to help offset some of that stuff so that it's not causing as much of an issue for you. There was some really great research that's been done where they found that they did a 5-day energy deficit with a 2-day refeed. And they did that for, I can't remember how many weeks it was, maybe 7 or 12 weeks. And then they had another group where they dieted continuously for that entire period of time, and found that the group that used refeeds, they retained more fat-free mass during that period of time. So they held on to more muscle mass than did the other people. And they also preserved their resting metabolic rate, which is huge. We all know that that's something that takes a really big hit during a caloric deficit, and that makes it difficult. We've talked about like how your metabolism can get really screwed up by doing extreme dieting. And that's part of what happens, is that your basal metabolic rate or your resting metabolic rate decreases so much that, eating like a potato chip is going to send you into a surplus.
Yeah. That we did talk about this before in one of our episodes about metabolic adaptations to fat loss. It's just, it takes more and more and more of a deficit for you to lose fat as you continually diet because of these changes in your basal metabolic rate.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that's really interesting with refeeds then is, so people think, okay, great, a refeed, I'm just going to eat more. But it's not just any food. It has to be predominantly carbohydrates that you are refeeding on. It's the carbohydrates that increase the release of leptin, which we want. We want more leptin. You want leptin to be as high as possible during a caloric deficit. And it also increases muscle protein synthesis. So even if you're not necessarily, if it's not going to create bigger, new, stronger muscle, it's at least attenuating some of the muscle loss that can occur during a caloric deficit. So it has to be carbohydrates. The same effect does not happen with dietary fat.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I know I have so many clients that they want to, on their refeed day, they want to like go eat a big, huge, greasy pizza. And
because listen, pizza's great.
Right. And while that I can get on board with wanting to do that, that increase in fat isn't helpful. So we're not really helping the intended purpose of the refeed.
Right. And it has to do with where you are in your goals too. If you're cutting for a meat that's, by the way, a week out, maybe not the best time to indulge in a pizza.
Right.
But if you're just trying to maintain and you want to treat yourself to some pizza, have yourself some pizza.
Right. The one thing that I think refeed days are really good at as well as there's psychological factors to it.
Absolutely.
It decreases that diet fatigue. I mean, all of us have been in a cut where we're like, man, I could really go for whatever. You want some cookies or whatever it is. If you know you have a refeed day or a refeed period coming up in 3 days, it's easy to say, I'm going to save that for my refeed. But if it's not for like, there's no end to your cut. If it's not for like 3 months, you're like, I cannot go 3 more months without a cookie, but you could go 3 days. And so I think that it increases adherence to caloric deficits. So I really like it for that purpose as well.
Yeah. And we're not saying that if you're in a caloric deficit, like you can't be eating cookies and stuff, but there is going to come a time, depending on how, or depending on what your goals are, that you truly cannot fit in a cookie, potentially, if your goals are to, hit a certain weight by a certain date and you are down to the wire,
Right. And I would say 99% of the athletes that I work with that are in a caloric deficit, they're trying to make weight for a meet. Right. And so we have to be strict about it.
You have to pay attention.
Right. Yeah. And so I know I have a lot of experience with my athletes doing refeeds. I love refeeds. We go anywhere from a day to, like I said, I've done 2-week diet breaks with people. That's actually some interesting research that's out, is the 2 weeks of energy restriction followed by 2 weeks of a diet break.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some really, really, really cool research that I really love. I geek out to every time I read it. I've implemented that with some of my clients. And while scientifically it's a fantastic thing, in real world, it maybe doesn't work as well for some people because,
Interesting.
yeah, what I've found, because I thought in my head, I'm like, this would be awesome. I've done it with myself. I've done it with several athletes. And for some people, there's a mindset shift that we know has to occur when you're in a caloric deficit.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so going in and out of that for people, especially people that aren't that experienced with being in planned caloric deficits, like really actually planning out, not just, I'm just going to cut out certain food groups or cut out, they're actually counting their macros and their caloric intake. People that don't have a lot of experience with that, I find it's difficult for them to do long diet breaks because it takes them a week or two to get back into the swing of being in a caloric deficit. So while in theory, it's an awesome principle, I think that it's in the practicality of it is a little bit more difficult to implement.
Yeah.
But it's also a really cool, it's a cool area of research. So
yeah, and this is where it's a good thing to have a coach because they'll be able to look at that. And while maybe Kristin has a couple clients who can do the 2-week diet break, other clients absolutely not. There's no freaking way. Right. And having someone to objectively look at you and be like, I know that sounds great to have a 2-week break, but you can't do it if you want to reach your goals.
Yeah. Yep. And that comes down to me knowing my athletes well, really good communication, and just figuring out what works best for them because, we can have all the research in the world that says, this way is the best way. And if an athlete can't adhere to it, it's not the best way.
Nope.
But so my tips for people with Refeed then, because whenever I prescribe Refeeds for clients, I get this a lot of time, about half the time I get an email back what? Are you sure? And then they think that it's a cheat day. I'm like, no, it's not a cheat day. I'm giving you, say, 100 grams more of carbs to have. And so my tips for people that say, every time I eat a lot of carbs, then I can't stop. And that is a cue to me that they're probably having really hyper palatable foods for their refeed, like cookies and candy. And so if you're the type of person who can't have just a small piece of candy without then going and raiding your local convenience store and buying all the candy in the store, then you need to have some more parameters around your refeed. So not just how many extra grams of carbohydrates you get, but also where those carbohydrates are coming from. And so I say to you, if that is your issue, skip the hyper palatable foods. A refeed is not an excuse to eat like a complete asshole. Yeah. It serves a very specific purpose. So it's a good time to take advantage of extra food that's available to you. So if you're craving cookie and you can handle just having cookie, great. If that sends you into a tailspin, then have things like rice, steel cut oats, sweet potatoes. It's not as exciting, but it will be exciting to you when you start to see results from it. And I think that tends to keep people on track. But definitely, if you're having a craving, go for it.
Oh, yeah. Just don't maybe eat all of them. Take out a couple cookies, put the rest of the cookies back, and then eat. Don't take out a cookie, eat it, and leave the thing open. That can lead to issues. Or do
and I eat half of them, and then I stop at Mary's and give her the other half on my way home.
Yep. This is why it's good to be friends with Kristin. She shows up at your house.
You need to take these because I can't. I've had all I'm allowed to have.
And then I literally sat down and ate the rest of them. So it is what it is. But you said something about sometimes people eat some of these foods and they can't stop. Yeah. And sometimes, yes, it is the palatable foods. I'm not disagreeing with you. That's totally true. It's happened to me too. You just get some chips or you get some cookies and you're just like, oh, these are so good. But sometimes there is an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. And we've talked about this before. We talked about disordered eating and eating disorders as a strength athlete. And I'm about to make a case. And you can agree with me or disagree with me, but I think the evidence is pretty strong for me, for my point, that cheat days actually can be very harmful for people with a history of disordered eating or an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So the basics of cheat days, right? They can be linked back to the days of good food versus bad food.
Yeah, putting things in categories.
Right. And cutting out categories themselves, like no bread or no carbs or only fruit or whatever nonsense people are spewing these days.
We even talk about that in our Eat for Strength course when we're talking about carbohydrates. And a lot of people talk about like good carbohydrates, bad carbohydrates.
Yes.
And I say, we're not going to look at it that way. We're going to talk about the right carbohydrate for the right time.
Yes.
There's no bad carbohydrate. There's just the appropriate time and an inappropriate time for it.
Yep. And that doesn't mean that if you're having one of those days that you have an inappropriate carb at the inappropriate time, your world's over. It's fine.
Right.
But yeah, we try very hard, and I try in, the intuitive eating ebook to do the same thing. Like, these are high glycemic and low glycemic carbs. They're not good or bad. They just are used differently by the body.
Exactly.
So as we said, food is not inherently good or bad, right? There is no angel or demon in these foods trying to get your moral all wrong, right?
I don't know. I feel like there's a demon in that bag of cookies that I bring you from Marshall's.
Yeah, but it's okay. I'll deal with that one. So these foods are neither good or bad, right? Right. Before refeeds, people recognize the benefits of a day with higher calories on their psychology and their bodies. This is what Kristin said. This is back to the leptin and the basal metabolic rate and saving your fat-free mass. Like, there's a lot of really good things that you should be implementing a refeed for.
Yeah, bodybuilders have used this for years and years.
Years.
But I think before there was ever even research on it. I think that's where a lot of the research is stemming from, is like, why do these things work? Because we have all of this anecdotal evidence to suggest that they work. We don't know why they work.
We don't know why they work. Right. And as Kristin said, the cheat days are what gave people back in the days of mostly bodybuilding, and I think even still nowadays, but mostly back in the day, cheat days gave people who were dieting a relief from the diet itself. And just like she said, they didn't know why, but it's like the next day they come back maybe leaner, they come back feeling better, they come back and crush their workout. And so it's like a psychological boost. Here is where it can get very dicey if you have a history of disordered eating or an eating disorder. So someone like me who has suffered from disordered eating in the past, I used to be triggered by cheat days or even refeed days. So what Kristin said earlier about you can just wait 3 days to do your refeed day. Well, for me, that's not what would happen. I would see that I had a planned refeed day and I would be like, oh, I can just take it on Monday. And then I would do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday refeed day, which really just turned into a cheat day because I just couldn't handle any type of structure or rigidity in what I was doing.
Well, and so you were in the camp of people that shouldn't have been in a caloric deficit in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we know hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
We know that now.
Yeah.
You didn't know that at the time. You didn't understand what was happening at the
No,
time.
I just thought that I was broken and there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't do this thing that so many other people just seem to so effortlessly do. And yeah, there was something wrong with me, but it wasn't what I was thinking. I wasn't lazy.
It wasn't a lack of discipline.
No, I was pushing my body way too much for way too long. And my brain finally said, fuck it. We're going to do what we want to do. So labeling a day of eating more food as a cheat day still can have some psychological effects. So hear this riddle. Cheating is bad, right? We hear someone's cheated on someone, we think cheating bad. Bad.
Cheating in sports, bad. Cheating on a test, bad.
Cheating on your spouse, very bad. These are all bad things. But these cheat days, they weren't designed to be bad, but for someone who struggles with food itself, labeling his entire day as good or as bad can be detrimental for your progress, just like what I did. If I saw an entire week and I had one day of a refeed day, to me that meant cheat day. To me that meant a bad day. Or I didn't recognize it then, but I recognize it now. My brain said, okay, that day I'm going to get to binge. I'm going to get to eat all these foods that I've been not letting myself have, and then it would just explode, right?
Right. Because if you had 100 grams of carbs extra, all of the things that you wanted are more than 100 grams of carbs.
Yeah, they were very much more. and I think a lot of these bigger influencers kind of do a disservice because they'll do, especially people of my generation on YouTube, they'll do like a 10,000 calorie cheat day or whatever. Like, come on now.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, it was a trend a few years ago. People are going like 20,000 calorie cheat days.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
it's
that's
bad.
just binge eating.
That's binge eating, or that's just being really reckless and trying to get the views.
Oh, right. It's almost, see, my generation, we didn't grow up with worrying about the views and the following. You just did your thing.
What a relief. So if you're having a cheat day, then you're likely still labeling foods as good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Just like I said, like if I saw a cheat day, I was like, oh, I can eat the bad foods that day. And then that would just turn into multiple days. So being able to eat the bad foods, as I said, for an entire day, right? So we can just cheat and have an entire day. First of all, comes a wave of extreme guilt. If you struggle with food, having an entire day to essentially binge out will most likely lead to you feeling guilty the next day. Because even if it was planned, even if your coach, whoever it was like, you know what? I want you to have a 10,000 calorie cheat day. I want you to eat as much food as you possibly can that day. I want you to feel like you want to puke. The next day, you're still going to feel guilty because you still hate your body and you still hate the way that you look at yourself. So now you're going to say, okay, I had a cheat day. I got to eat the fun things. The next day, you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to have this spew of negativity just coming out from you because you did something quote unquote bad, even though you were allowed to do it.
Well, and there's also science to suggest that if you eat like really a lot of sugar, that can affects your hormones in such a way that it can make you feel depressed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat a ton of sugar when you don't normally, you're going to have this huge blood sugar. You're just not going to feel good. You're going to have a big blood sugar spike. You're not going to feel well. You're probably going to feel a little bit depressed. And some of that is like biochemical and some of that is psychological.
Yeah. I remember the last binge I ever had, I ate, just everything. I think part of it was like half of a 2-pound tub of peanut butter, which is a lot of calories, right? And I told myself so many times I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do it again. The next morning I got up to go for a walk with my dog and I cannot tell you how horrible I felt that day.
Like physically or mentally?
Physically, mentally, emotionally, all of the above. Like nothing, all my joints hurt, my head hurt, everything hurt. And I finally realized, I was like, oh, maybe we need to change something. So just because the bad foods were allowed, like I said, that doesn't mean your relationship with the food or with the idea of having a cheat day has changed.
Right. I totally agree. And that's what I really like. I like calling it a refeed because they're two different things, right? A cheat and a refeed are two different things.
Yeah.
It's educating people on the fact that a refeed is not a cheat.
Exactly.
There are still rules. But if you're the type of person who is in the throes of disordered eating or eating disorder, you shouldn't be that regulated anyway.
Absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
if you have picked up my intuitive eating ebook, you know that one of the first rules I say is, okay, the first rule is that there are no rules. Take everything out. No restrictions, no trying to cut, no trying to bulk. You're just trying to repair this relationship with food. So the second thing that this can lead to is a slippery slope, right? Logically, in our disordered eating brains, we just screwed up an entire week. Even if it was allowed, even if our coach said we could do it, we have now put ourselves in more of a surplus than what we were before, and that's not going to get us anywhere closer to having a skinny, lean body or whatever we want, which will then, we'll love ourselves. Mm-hmm. We will love ourselves once we're skinny. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not going to get any closer to that thigh gap. What the fuck is that? I don't even want one of those. If I have a thigh gap, I can't squat very much weight.
When I was in high school and I was playing 3 sports, and I didn't continue that throughout my whole high school career, but when I was playing 3 sports, I was fairly lean, and I don't ever remember thinking about thigh gaps. Like I just don't, it didn't occur to me. But the second I started dieting and exercising to look a certain way, all of a sudden I noticed thigh gaps. And I noticed all these people who honestly are just genetically predisposed to a thigh gap. I will never, ever in my life have a thigh gap because my legs, they're like next to each other, right? Even if I got my legs really skinny, they still gon' touch.
Right. And I want to backtrack a little bit because I'm not shaming anyone that has a thigh gap. I'm
That's
saying if that's your whole like goal is just to have a thigh gap, like there might be more to life.
Yes. And you might need to do a little reflection and recognize that maybe you need to love your body the way it is first. Anyway, got a little sidetrack there.
Yeah, whoops. My bad.
We are more likely to continue, it's okay, our cheat into the next day or week if we don't have a healthy relationship with food, right?
Oh my gosh. We've all heard of like a cheat day turning into a cheat weekend, to a cheat week, to a cheat month. Yeah.
And if you're following a shitty person who's just trying to sell you stuff, they will chastise you for not being able to follow the plan. You just need to try harder. You just need to work smarter, whatever. No, you're broken and we love you and you got to fix your brain. Okay. We also remember how good bad food tastes. This is part of that slippery slope, right? And if we're starving our bodies and all of a sudden we give our bodies everything it's been craving and not allowing ourselves to have certain foods on days that we're not cheating, we're most likely to cave every single day, right? Especially if we just had a 24-hour gorge sesh. So it's going to lead you to this slippery slope if you have some disordered eating. Now, I want to say there's a caveat, right? We're talking specifically about cheat days here. Refeed days and some people who overcome their disordered eating with macros, they're beautiful. People who are like that, they see it as a number, they see it as a goal, they see it as a structure, and they can work it perfectly into their life and their recovery, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just talking about specifically cheat days and specifically people who have not healed their relationship with food.
Right.
So as I said, cheat days are not ideal for individuals who have been through any type of disordered eating or have recovered from an eating disorder. Remember, refeed day, cheat day, very different.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think cheat days are ideal for anyone. Like just don't call it, even if you don't have a history of disordered eating or an eating disorder, don't call it a cheat day because that just makes anyone feel bad. Just if you're going to eat more food than what you needed. So remember, if it's a refeed, it's still planned and it's still needed. So if you're just going to eat more food one day, just do it. Like it's fine. You don't have to say that it was good or bad. It's a fact. You ate more food maybe than what your body needed that day, but maybe your mind needed it or whatever. But I don't think anyone should be doing a quote unquote cheat day for so many reasons.
Right. And the psychology of taking away any and all restrictions on yourself and then just allowing yourself to eat whatever you want. Over time, it changes your whole brain chemistry in which eating a whole thing of Oreos now is like, ugh, I'm going to feel so gross. I don't want that. I don't. Yeah, I will pass, which is huge for anyone who has overcome any type of disordered eating.
I think that so many things in life, you just have to give yourself permission to just go with the flow, right?
Yes.
I've even done meats where like in meat prep, I'm deep in the throes of meat prep and it suddenly has turned into this like have to do this kind of thing. And I see it as work and a drag. And I'll say like, you know what? I'm just going to give myself permission to not do the meat if I don't want to do the meat. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing, but I've now given myself permission to not do the meat. And by the very next day, I'm like, all right, let's do this meat. Like I think giving yourself permission to not have these like have tos or can'ts or whatever is life altering in so many different ways, not just food, not just lifting, just work and relationships and saying like, I choose this rather than I have to do this.
Yes.
Or I choose not to eat this rather than I can't eat this.
The more and more you try to control and compress your life into this perfect little box, the more your life is trying to escape from all corners of this box. You just need to open the box and let your life explode out of it. Just like
literally, yeah.
Literally, yeah. I think that was the biggest thing with me and my disordered eating was giving myself first, being very patient with myself and recognizing that what I was going through was going to take time. I was probably not going to love how my body looked. And that's okay. I stopped looking in mirrors. Like I made sure that I took steps to not hate myself, which was stepping off, not going on the scale, not looking in mirrors that often. And then I also gave myself permission to do whatever the hell I want. And I talk about this in the ebook. Like I truly had a gorge sesh for a couple months because my brain was so put into that box that it needed to know that I would never do that to it ever again. And then now I have, like my husband said the other day, he goes, babe, we have so much peanut butter. Why do we have so much peanut butter? And I'm like, I just don't eat it that much anymore. I don't know. And he's like, that's so weird. Are you sure you're not like closet eating it anymore? And I'm like, no, I literally can look at peanut butter and go, when I used to have to go, I'll just have one spoonful. Just have one.
And then the whole jar.
And then the whole jar, 2 pounds of peanut butter. That's a lot. Okay. So now that I've told you why I think cheat days are very bad for someone who has any type of disordered eating past or who's going through it, I'm going to give you some options what you can do instead of doing a cheat day. First off, I think it's most important, if you're tracking macros, you can handle refeed days. If you have gained control of your disordered eating through tracking macros, refeed days, bonus. They're great. It'll give you that break, and then you can just dive right back in. And if it's prescribed by your coach, don't just decide that a day is a refeed day.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
that's
make sure your coach tells you it's okay.
Right. That's one thing. I have had clients like, I did a refeed day because I heard you talk about it on the podcast. I'm like, no, that doesn't fit your plan. Like, that's awesome. I'm glad you thought that was going to be a good idea. That was not planned. That's the one thing I want to make sure that we recognize is that refeeds are planned. They are part of your plan. If you have a coach that is prescribing them, they have those extra calories kind of factored into your plan. They prescribe them at the right times. They prescribe them for the right people because not everyone can handle them.
Yes.
And one thing that's really, really important to know is that they fall on a particular day. It is not something that you save for if you have an oops.
Oh yeah, no, these are not oops days. These are refeed days.
Right. It's not that you go, oh shit, I binge ate a bunch of cookies and I'll just call today my refeed day. That's not the intended purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really slippery slope.
That's what I used to do. I'd be like, oh shit, I just ate a lot of food. Okay, refeed day. Tomorrow I'll be fine. And then tomorrow wasn't fine.
Right. And the reason to me that's why we shouldn't do them that way is because it's suggesting an underlying problem.
Right.
That they are a certain number of carbohydrates, and following those refeeds is part of your plan. I've definitely had clients ask me when we talk about compliance with their plan and they're like, well, am I still allowed to take my refeed? I'm like, absolutely. It would be uncompliant of you not to take your refeed.
Yes.
So,
and if your coach is not implementing refeeds, you can always ask them about it, but just don't do it.
Yeah, just don't just go do it.
Don't just go do it.
Because some people, I will say this, that if I don't know an athlete well enough, if they hire me to cut for a meet and they're within 2 months of the meet and we've got a significant amount of weight to cut, some people's bodies handle carbohydrates differently than other people's, and they might have a massive weight spike that could take a while to come off. We need to know that well in advance of a meet. So just a note to you, if you're going to hire me to cut for a meet that's in like 4 to 8 weeks, I might not implement I might not implement refeed days just because it's unknown, and if we're already down to the wire, it's maybe a little bit risky. So there's a time and a place for them.
Mm-hmm. And I said don't do it because really, if you're 4 to 8 weeks out from a meet, unless you're trying to do something national or international, just lift where you're at.
A lot of my athletes are. I've got some pretty stellar athletes.
See, then they are the exception. That's fine. Like if you're trying to do big things, that's fine. If you are just going for like your first meet or a fun meet, nope.
We've talked about this 100 times. Don't cut weight for your first meet. Don't cut weight for a local meet unless you're doing it like to see how you would feel cutting weight. You can do it as an experiment, but don't do it just because, I think I would be more competitive at this weight class at a local meet. Like it doesn't really matter at the local level as much.
But even if you just need to be on maintenance, Kristin is your gal. Okay. Other things, allow yourself treats every single day. Don't wait for just one single day. I remember when I was recovering and I finally got a handle on my food, I would allow myself one peanut butter and jelly a day. It was like my favorite thing, but that was it. No binging of the peanut butter, one peanut butter and jelly a day. And surprise, I didn't binge peanut butter after that.
Because you were allowed to have it often.
Mm-hmm. It's not a cheat, it's a treat.
Yeah.
If you can't track macros without sending yourself into a disordered eating episode, stop all your dieting. It might be time to give your mind just a break and try a different strategy like intuitive eating. I am an avid advocate for intuitive eating. That's all that I do. That's all that I probably will ever do, because I have done some macro tracking in the past, that even recently, and it just seems that every couple of weeks I can just feel myself going back into this disordered eating mindset. So I'm fine with that. Is it harder to like cut and do all these things? Absolutely. But would I trade that for the peace of mind that I have being an intuitive eater? Absolutely not. Nothing would make me want to change how chill my brain is about food, because I freak out about way too many other things now. But the chillness of food is just like this big gift from the food gods.
Well, and that's the most important thing, is being healthy, right? I mean, you're not at an unhealthy body weight. You're not, I mean, there's, so if you wanted to cut 5 pounds, it's probably purely for aesthetic purposes, which it's not worth your mental health. Those 5 pounds are not worth your mental health.
And you can cut doing intuitive eating. You just have to, first of all, have been doing it long enough to understand how your body reacts. So, and what type of deficit do you need? Like for me, if I cut out my fats, like if I cut down fats, not saying I track fats, but if you eat peanut butter, you know that has fat in it, right? If I cut down my fats, I know that I'm a mess. So I try to take away from my carbs, and it's nothing big. I'm not taking away 100 grams of carbs, but it's just like little servings, which I talk about in the book. But so I won't get too deep into it, but yeah, it's what were we saying?
We were talking about intuitive eating and how you can cut on intuitive eating if you've been doing it for a long time and you're familiar with the principles and you know how it works, and your brain is not going into these really detrimental places.
Yeah, Kristin said it exactly how I should have said it. But I would recommend not doing that. Just eat where you're at and figure out your shit. And maybe you can track again. Maybe you can't. But bringing this all back, cheat days and refeed days are completely different. Here in the strength sport world, we want to shy away from cheat day, using that terminology at all, because it doesn't address what we're trying to do with these days of increased carbs. That's not what it is. It's not exactly what we're going for. And it's kind of misused in the bodybuilding world anyway.
And I do want to just say that I said it in the beginning, but I want to reiterate this, that refeeds are only used during a period of caloric restriction. If you are eating in maintenance and you're feeling hungry a lot, you're probably not eating enough food. You're probably not really at maintenance. So that's one sign that you may need more food. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, I've talked about how I purposely have gained weight since my last meet. I've gained like 8 to 10 pounds. And one of the things that I had to do to get my body to the place where I could put on the strength that I wanted to put on was I was increasing my caloric intake. I was going up into a surplus. Then I would find that I would still be in a little bit of a deficit. And so I might do a refeed day. And so that's totally different ball game. That's something that's a lot more complicated, but just know that if you're feeling like you need refeed day, you're probably just not eating enough food if you're supposed to be in a caloric balance.
Yeah, you may just need to increase food overall.
Yeah, they're really just reserved for caloric restriction periods.
This is where having a nutrition coach is muy beneficial. Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, of course I agree. I'm very biased. Of course I agree.
Of course. That's cheat day versus refeed day. So if you guys want to support us and support the podcast, please become a Patreon. It's patreon.com/empoweredbyiron. Always linked below or in our Instagram bio. We really appreciate your support, and we are really working on bringing you guys some pretty exclusive content there.
Yes. And if you are interested in any of the research that I talked about, we have links in the show notes.
They're just links to the articles. We do try to put out a blog post on Female Strength Academy with each episode that we put out. And in those episodes, you can also find the research.
Yep.
All right. And with that, I think that that's it. We hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye, ladies.
Bye, ladies.